Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Ratika Anand from the University of Delhi, and I'm here to discuss feminism and psychoanalysis with special reference to Hélène Cixous, Luce Irigaray, and the Spectre of Lacan. In this module, I will be providing you with a brief background on feminism and psychoanalysis, which would help in your understanding of psychoanalytical feminism. Hélène Cixous and Luce Irigaray are French feminists who worked very closely with psychoanalysis, especially with the theories of the prominent psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan. Lacan's concept of the mirror stage is significant to gain a perspective on why French feminists link their theories to Lacan's work. Both Cixous and Irigaray are not only influenced by Lacan's work, but at the same time view some of his work in critical light. It would be interesting to see how feminism can be linked to such a distinct field of psychoanalysis to show sexual difference initiates in such an early stage called the pre-Oedipal stage itself, and language, laws, and norms are biased towards men, giving women a secondary status in the society. Let me first give you a brief background on feminism. Feminism is characterized by political movement, range of ideologies, and social revolution, each driven by the sole objective to align women's personal and political status with that of men. The aim was not to displace the patriarchal center with the feminist model, but to empower women to formulate an identity in the society through gaining the right to vote, being a part of the productive labor, receive education, achieve reproductive rights, and to own property. Feminist movement has been divided into three stages called the three waves of feminism. The first wave was synonymous with the women's suffragette movement when they fought for the right to vote. The second wave, women participated in and were also influenced by the civil rights movement that were going on simultaneously in the 1960s. The second wave was a reaction to the post-World War domestication of women, limiting their involvement to the household chores. Betty Friedan, with her book The Feminine Mystique, is often credited with starting this wave of feminist movement, which focused on issues like marriage, reproductive rights, workplace environment, and physical and sexual violence. In the third wave, the issues which surfaced in the second wave were addressed too. For instance, the exclusion of women from the earliest feminist movement on the basis of color, caste, race, and this along with the issues of gender and sexuality was central to the third wave ideology. It began in the 1990s and the movement still continues even today. For instance, the slut walk in 2011 and the present time queer movements taking place in different parts of the world. The critical approaches in the 1980s are also very significant in our understanding of feminine writing and would also help us in the understanding of the work of both our French feminists Hélène Cixous and Luce Irigaray. The first stage drew on the approaches of other kinds of criticisms: Marxism, structuralism, psychoanalysis, linguistics, etc. The second stage laid greater emphasis on reconstruction of female experience, no longer limited the movement to attack only the male supremacy. In the third stage, efforts were directed at rewriting women's history and creating a new canon of women's writing. Let me now give you an introduction to psychoanalysis with reference to the theories of Jacques Lacan. Psychoanalysis was founded by Sigmund Freud, who was also known as the father of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis employs theories and methods to delve into one's unconscious. Unconscious can be defined as repressed thoughts and experiences, suppressed emotions, and latent desires. Psychoanalysis stems from the theory of unconscious, which attempts to examine the links between sexuality and subjectivity. Jacques Lacan was a very prominent French psychoanalyst who influenced distinct fields like post-structuralism, feminism, Marxism, and film theory. Lacan represents his own work as a return to Freud, bringing the understanding of structural linguists Ferdinand de Saussure and Roman Jakobson, and also structural anthropologist Levi Strauss into the realm of psychoanalysis. His most influential work was the mirror stage as formative of the I function as revealed in the psychoanalytic experience. For Lacan, unconscious is structured like a language. Lacan's three orders of one's mental disposition are responsible in the construction of one's identity. These three orders are the imaginary phase, the symbolic order, and the real order. The understanding of these three orders are going to be very helpful to understand. The understanding of these three orders would help us in the understanding of the mirror stage. The first order is the imaginary phase, which is also called the pre-Oedipal phase, when an infant identifies for the first time with his or her image reflected in the mirror. The infant is about 6 months of age and at this stage has no identity. There is no difference between self and the other. He or she constructs an image, an idealized image, an elevated image about himself or herself, which is a mere illusion, a product of his imagination, and may not even match the real self. Since the real self lacks mobility, it even lacks basic speech and motor skills. The child at this stage is oblivious to the dominant culture, which will separate the infant from the mother. It is for the first time that the child formulates an understanding of his or her body, and through this process of identification, the child is able to develop his or her ego, leading to the second stage. The second stage is known as the symbolic order. The child is introduced to the father, the big other, the paternal figure of authority who sets norms and frames the rules of law and language. Phallus is an important symbol and is referred to as the master signifier. It is the center of the symbolic order. It is a representative of the sexual difference in its presence or absence. However, Lacan says that sexual difference is not biological, but established through law and language. Castration, too, functions as another symbol at forcing the child to step into the second symbolic stage governed by the law of the father. The child has to let go of the bond with the mother and set out to acquire the concepts of language and meet socio-cultural expectations dictated by the father. The third order is the real order. It is not placed in opposition to the imaginary phase, but beyond the symbolic order. The real order for Lacan is comprehensive, as language fails to define the experience. Lacan views this stage as pre-imaginary, completeness which is later lost. Lacan views this stage as pre-imaginary, symbolizing completeness, which is later lost once language comes into existence. It continues to surface in our lives, against which our fluid fantasies and linguistic structure fail. It is often read as traumatic, as it makes one realize the materiality of our existence. Now, within feminist literary criticism, there are three major divisions. First one is the Anglo-American feminism, the second one is the British feminism, and the third is the French feminism. Since Hélène Cixous and Luce Irigaray are both French feminists, let me give you a brief introduction on French feminism. French feminism is theoretical. It is influenced by post-structuralists like Lacan, Derrida, and Foucault. French feminists deal more closely with the issue than literature. Major figures of French feminism are Hélène Cixous, Luce Irigaray, and Julia Kristeva. They focus on how female physiology can guide women's writing. The work of Lacan plays a powerful influence and also an object of critique. This is Hélène Cixous, whose works and writings we would be discussing in this section. Now let us look into the works of Hélène Cixous. There are these three issues that majorly surface in her writings, which are bisexuality, the unconscious, and feminine writing, which we shall be discussing at length. Hélène Cixous coined the phrase l'écriture féminine, meaning feminine writing, which was also her central theme. Her critical works, The Laugh of Medusa and Sorties, were both published in 1975. The Laugh of Medusa builds up a psychoanalytical interpretation of the Greek mythology to challenge the patriarchy, while Sorties works on establishing a connection between women's desire and women's language. First, let us discuss the notion of the unconscious that features in her writings. The concept of the unconscious space persists outside culture. Unconscious is associated with femininity and repression. Imperialist metaphors like darkness, for instance, are associated with women like Medusa. Medusa was a powerful, beautiful, and charming young priestess. From a woman of desire, she was reduced to a monstrous woman. This abysmal portrayal of Medusa, remarks Cixous, is framed within the purview of the male gaze. Metaphors of conflict, imagery of violence and war feature in the writings of Cixous. Even the title Sorties means a battle, which Cixous herself is fighting through her writings. Let us now talk about the question of bisexuality, which is another prominent theme in her writings. Bisexuality is often seen as a threat because of the ambiguity surrounding the sexuality. It is also seen as a threat. It is also seen as a threat to the model of binary opposition. The idea of bisexuality is drawn from the theory of Lacan, Freud, and even Derrida. Cixous proposes bisexuality for women, especially because they have been conditioned to accept the role assigned to them. By bisexuality, Cixous doesn't mean a combination of sexes like in the idea of androgyny propagated by Virginia Woolf. She instead means a displacement of dual categorization of masculine and feminine and move beyond this division. Let us also now look into the subject of jouissance. Similar to the concept of the unconscious is this subject of jouissance, because it is also outside the cultural sphere. Jouissance is a source of pleasure beyond male hegemony. It operates in the realm of female imagination outside the patriarchal sphere. It is perceived as a source of women's writing, displacing the law of the father, thereby providing an expression to women. Now, let us discuss her idea behind placement of feminine writing in imaginary phase. Like I said, feminine writing is very central to Cixous' work. And now, let us discuss her idea behind her placement of feminine writing in the imaginary phase. Cixous places feminine writing in the pre-Oedipal or imaginary phase. She chooses pre-Oedipal phase since the infant is not yet conditioned by the dominant culture. There is time to cultivate oppositional boundaries prior to being classified as masculine or feminine. Cixous is critical of the model of binary opposition that has given women the status of the other. To overcome these binaries, she uses the approach of employing excess. For instance, the laughter in the laugh of Medusa, which stands to redeem women and liberate them from the shackles of male mythology. She also wrote about the challenges faced by women at feminine writing. Now let us discuss those challenges. Women are encouraged by Cixous to think differently about their histories and reinvent another history with their own language that is free from any bias. The female body and her sexuality cannot be represented by phallogocentrism, which is actually a term used by both Cixous and Irigaray, and it combines the elements of patriarchy and language. Women are made to move away from the mother and then their own body. Thereby, female sexuality itself is smothered. When Cixous says, and I quote, "Women must write herself," unquote, and she also says that women must write women. She wants women to give an expression to A, feminist structure, and B, her own individual voice and experience. Women's writing is a physical act and is therefore compared to the act of childbirth. Let us also discuss the nature of feminine writing. For Cixous, feminine writing is seen as transformative in nature. At first level, the individual finds an expression as women attempt to find their sexuality. Women should stop reproducing phallogocentrism in their work and speak and write through their own bodies, taking up active subject positions and giving up the passive roles assigned to them. Cixous also hints at the other mediums women writing can experiment with. For instance, white ink is a reference to milk, and they can also explore the mediums like songs and bodies. Women's writing, she thinks, cannot be defined, and they cannot be placed in an enclosed structure like men's writing. Let us also see what are the suggestions that Cixous offers to women. Women who are at the margins of symbolic order and their language is also more free-flowing, closer to the imaginary phase with no fixities, should experiment more with their own language free from any bias. Unlike the stable order and the absolute language of men, she suggests that women must write herself and women must write women. She also advises women to choose writing poetry over realistic prose. Since poetry has no fixed meanings and sees fluid associations with signifiers, while novel represents an established structure through absolute masculine language. And this is Luce Irigaray, another prominent French feminist whose work and writing we would be now discussing. Luce Irigaray engages with the interdisciplinary works from philosophy, psychoanalysis, and linguistic fields. Speculum of Other Women, which was published in 1974, is Irigaray's most acclaimed work. Irigaray is a student of Lacan, yet she was critical of Lacan's monolithic and sexist model of gender difference solely based on the presence or absence of the phallus. For Irigaray, biology is culturally defined. Like Cixous, she was also against binary opposition, which places women as the other. Let us now look into the critique of Lacan that feature in her writings. She distances herself from Lacan's two very important arguments. The first one was Lacan's presentation of the symbolic order being called as ahistorical. Symbolic order, argues Irigaray, is not ahistorical, but a construct, says Irigaray, to reinforce male supremacy. Secondly, she was also not convinced of Lacan's description of the phallus, and since he says it has also no connection with the male anatomy. However, for Irigaray, phallus is not symbolic, but it is rather an extension of Freud's one-sex model. Now, the first very important component in Irigaray's theory is that of language. Language is integral both to Lacan and Irigaray. In An Ethics of Sexual Difference, Irigaray states the sexual difference rests in language and not an anatomical difference. Language plays a significant role in sustaining the supremacy of men. The object of power, the object of value, for instance God, Irigaray argues, are represented by men. Having studied the speech patterns of both men and women, she found out that women are excluded from the subject positions. There is a need to reconstruct women's identity autonomous of the pre-established standard framed by male hegemony. The other very important theme is that of sexual differentiation. Irigaray also hints at the new possibilities sexual differentiation can offer if women start speaking differently. She views sexual differentiation in a positive light. Irigaray herself is known for a unique writing style called mimesis. Through this style, she challenges authority by responding to the biased perspective against women as being false. She argues that there is no need to ignore or repress these views against women. Instead, they must challenge them. The strategy of readdressing or replying to male dominance is referred to as strategic essentialism. Let us now discuss Irigaray's utopian ideals and her thoughts on Marxist feminism. Irigaray expresses her utopian ideals in Sexes and Genealogies. She discusses that the protection of virginity is a patriarchal construct and a means to control and guard female sexuality. She also discusses the need for protection of the mother and daughter relationship. Irigaray's other very important essay, When the Goods Get Together, is a Marxist feminist critique on the commodification of women in a male-dominated economy. And when I say male-dominated, there is this homosexual relationship established in the market as the trade of products, services, and even women takes place among men. And this homosexual relationship that established in the market can be seen to go against the system of binary opposition and even the law of the father in the symbolic order. On the other hand, women are limited to the territory of heterosexuality, wherein they are assigned only reproductive roles. Female sexuality exists only in relation to male sexuality. So what are the solutions Irigaray offers through her writings? Being two different beings, masculine and feminine, a dual arrangement by forming two different parts must exist in culture, she says, so that both the sexes can grow distinctly without being hindered by any norm or intimidated by any set parameter. Women need to subvert the established male hegemony that has given a subordinate status to women. How do they do that? By overthrowing the repressed phallocentric language. There is a need to split, and indeed to be the sex which is not one with the dominant male oppressor. Let me now briefly summarize for you the points I presented on French feminists Cixous and Irigaray. Cixous and Irigaray, they both attempt to work with the theories of Lacan as they try to overthrow the existing structure, not by replacing it, but by proposing to build a new model. Both want feminine structure to coexist as independent from the male model. Cixous discusses bisexuality, unconscious, and feminine writing, while Irigaray focuses on language and sexual difference. Language is integral to the theories of both Cixous and Irigaray. So while Cixous places feminine writing in imaginary phase, Irigaray places it in the symbolic realm. Cixous advocates poetry over prose, and she herself has a poetic style of writing. Irigaray is known for a different style of writing called mimesis. They both reject the model of binary opposition central to the meaning of the phallus in Lacan's theory. So students, I'm sure you now understand why Lacan plays such a significant role in the works of the French feminists Cixous and Irigaray. In their critique of Lacan's theory, they are also critiquing the phallocentric language and the male hegemonic structure prevalent in the society, as these elements are embedded in their works of Lacan and his theory of sexual differentiation, which starts in the pre-Oedipal stage itself. I hope through this module you learned how psychoanalytic theory are tactfully used by the French feminists in their eminent works on feminism and their groundbreaking theories under psychoanalytic feminism. For more information and further references, please refer to EPG Pathshala website and the e-text. Thank you.